Welcome to Quiet Universe, where the past whispers through the present and echoes ripple across time. Today, we'll journey into the mysterious connections that weave history into our modern world. Have you ever felt like something from long ago still lingers, quietly shaping what's happening now? Perhaps forgotten memories rise unexpectedly, or ancient secrets reveal themselves in the most unexpected places. Here, in this strange overlap between what was and what is, we'll explore the unseen forces and echoes of the past that continue to leave their mark on our lives today. So, let's dive deep into these hidden threads and unravel the mysteries that tie us to the generations long gone. The past isn't simply something that fades away. It lingers in ways we can't always perceive, shaping the present in ways that are subtle yet profound. Imagine walking through an old street, the cobblestones worn smooth by generations of footsteps. You might not notice it, but the decisions, struggles, and lives of people long gone echo through that very path beneath your feet. Their choices, from the grand gestures of revolutions to the quiet, personal moments of love or loss, have led to the world we know today. And yet, these connections are rarely in the spotlight because they aren't always easy to see. It's in the smallest of things. An old song that makes you feel nostalgic, though you've never heard it before, or the architecture of a building that somehow feels familiar. The world is filled with fragments of the past, often absorbed into the fabric of modern life so naturally that we fail to recognize them. Perhaps the way we gather in communities today echoes the gatherings of ancient people around fires, sharing stories to ward off the cold and loneliness. The tools we use, though they seem like leaps of modern innovation, have their origins in the simple tools created millennia ago by people with hands just like ours, minds filled with curiosity and a need to survive. There's an unbroken chain of experience, emotions, and lessons that stretch from the earliest moments of humanity to now. The struggles of survival, the search for meaning, the bonds of family and community, they haven't changed so much. What we see today, the technologies and social structures, are just new forms of ancient needs. And there's a strange comfort in that. Every time you learn something, every time you pass down knowledge, it's part of a larger story that started long before you and will continue long after. Those who lived in the past may be gone, but their experiences are interwoven into our lives in ways we often don't acknowledge. Think about the traditions passed down in families, recipes, customs, even certain turns of phrase. You may not know where they came from, but they connect you to ancestors who once stood in different lands, under different skies. It's not just in the obvious ways, like genetic inheritance or cultural traditions. There are deeper, less tangible ways the past seeps into our lives. The way we approach certain problems, the things that cause us to fear or hope, the stories we're drawn to, all of these are shaped by a legacy of human experience that stretches far beyond what we consciously recognize. The past isn't a distant, faded thing. It's a living presence, constantly intertwining with the now, shaping choices, decisions, and emotions. Even in the most ordinary moments, you are participating in something much older and far grander than yourself. There are unseen threads linking you to the lives of people who lived hundreds, thousands of years ago, their echoes resonating in the way you move through your world today. You may not always be able to see these connections, but they're there, quietly guiding you forward, just as they have guided countless others before you. There are moments when something long forgotten comes rushing back, like a faint whisper breaking through the noise of everyday life. These forgotten memories don't announce their return. They slip in quietly, triggered by the most unexpected things. A familiar scent, a random melody, the texture of an object you haven't touched in years. It's as if the past has been lying in wait, not entirely erased, but buried beneath layers of time, just waiting for the right moment to resurface. You may not have thought about it for years, and yet, when it comes back, it's as vivid as ever, carrying with it emotions you thought had long faded. What makes these moments so human is the unpredictability of them. You might be walking down a street you've traveled 1,000 times, and suddenly, a small detail, the color of a house, the sound of birds overhead, pulls you back to a memory you weren't even aware was still there. It's not always significant in the grand scheme of things, yet it feels powerful in that moment. Maybe it's a fragment of a childhood afternoon, the sunlight filtering through the trees in a way that felt important then, even if you couldn't say why. Or it could be the memory of a person, someone you haven't thought about in years, but whose presence suddenly feels very close, as if time has folded in on itself. These resurfacing memories are strange because they remind us how much we carry with us, even when we aren't conscious of it. They're like echoes, subtle reminders that the past never fully lets go. And when they come back, they don't just bring the memory itself, they bring the emotions tied to it. You might find yourself feeling joy or sadness that seems out of place in the present moment, but it's real because for a brief second, you're living in both the past and the present at once. It's an experience that reminds you how layered life is, how your mind holds onto things long after you've moved on. There's something deeply personal about these forgotten memories. No one else can experience them quite the way you do. They belong to you, shaped by your perspective, your experiences, your emotions. And when they resurface, they often come with questions. Why did I forget this? Why is it coming back now? What does it mean? Sometimes, the answers aren't clear, but the memory lingers anyway, demanding your attention, even if just for a fleeting moment. It's like the past is reminding you that it's still part of who you are, whether you acknowledge it or not. These moments are unsettling because they show how little control we have over what we remember. It's a reminder that the mind is not a neat, organized archive, but more like a vast landscape, full of hidden corners and overgrown paths. Sometimes, something stirs in those hidden places, and a forgotten memory pushes its way to the surface, unbidden but insistent. And when it does, it feels like time collapses for a moment, like the years that have passed since that memory was first made suddenly don't matter. You're there again, in that place, with those feelings, however briefly. It's a reminder that no matter how far you think you've traveled from the past, it's always there, somewhere, waiting. There's a strange power in the way the lives of those long gone continue to shape the world today, often in ways we don't even realize. Decisions made by individuals who have been dust for centuries still ripple through time, subtly influencing the course of events. Sometimes it's the ideas they championed, sometimes the actions they took, or even the systems they built, but their fingerprints are all over the present, quietly guiding the choices we make and the realities we live in. You might be unaware, sitting in a modern room, scrolling through the news, or dealing with everyday problems, that the roots of what you're experiencing can often be traced back to a single person who lived in a vastly different world. Consider the frameworks of governments, laws, and societies. These structures didn't just appear overnight. They were crafted, debated, and fought over by people whose names might now be just footnotes in history books. But what they believed in, whether it was justice, power, control, or freedom, still courses through the institutions we interact with daily. Even the language we use to talk about freedom or rights was shaped by the philosophies of individuals long gone, their words still echoing in political speeches, courtrooms, and everyday conversations. It's eerie to think that people who never lived to see the modern world we know could still have such an influence over its shape. Then there are the inventions and discoveries that have altered the course of history. The vision of someone who dared to look at the world differently, who pursued an idea against the grain, continues to impact us in ways we often take for granted. You might hold a smartphone in your hand, but behind that technology lies the legacy of countless inventors and thinkers whose individual contributions, some made hundreds of years ago, laid the groundwork for the devices that have become so essential to modern life. And in a way, their thoughts and ambitions have lived on, woven into the fabric of the world they could never have imagined, yet influenced so profoundly. Even in the realm of culture and art, the influence of individuals long dead continues to ripple through the present. The stories we tell, the way we express ourselves, often draw from ideas and themes set in motion by artists and writers who may have struggled for recognition in their own time. Yet, their work shaped the cultural landscape, influencing generations of creators who followed. A piece of music, a poem, or a painting from centuries ago can still move us. Its impact is real now as it was when it was first crafted. These creators, long gone, have left behind not just their work but an emotional resonance that lingers, touching lives they never knew would exist. What's deeply human about this is the realization that none of us act in isolation. Our lives, our actions, our decisions are part of a larger web that stretches back through time. The influence of long-dead individuals reminds us that history is not some distant thing, locked away in books and museums. It's alive, pulsing through the events of today. And it's not just famous figures who shape the world. Countless individuals whose names have been lost to time have contributed to the realities we navigate now. Every generation leaves its mark, consciously or not, on the ones that follow, just as we are being shaped by those who came before us. In a sense, the past isn't really past. It lives in the choices we make today, in the systems we uphold or challenge, and in the ideas that continue to drive us forward. There are moments when history feels like a neatly written record, with events and names clearly laid out, but beneath that surface lie secrets, hidden threads that have shaped the present in ways we're often unaware of. These secrets, buried in forgotten documents or lost in the memories of those who kept them, can still influence the course of modern events. It's as if the full story is always just out of reach, but its influence lingers, quietly shaping decisions, altering the paths of nations, and guiding human behavior in unexpected ways. These hidden elements often reveal themselves not through grand revelations, but in subtle shifts, unexpected political moves, unexplained social changes, or technological advancements whose origins seem murky. Imagine how a long-hidden agreement, kept secret by those in power generations ago, could quietly influence modern diplomacy. Perhaps a decision made in a small room, away from public eyes, now determines the alliances that hold nations together or push them apart. We might not see the hand of history at work, but it's there, concealed beneath layers of time and intention. The people involved may have believed they were acting in the best interests of their time, but those choices ripple forward, bending current events in ways no one could have predicted. Then there are discoveries or innovations that were lost to time, only to be rediscovered centuries later. When they resurface, they don't simply change the world in the moment. They shift the trajectory of entire fields. A hidden manuscript, a forgotten experiment, can lead to breakthroughs that feel brand new, yet they are deeply rooted in the past, in the quiet work of someone who toiled in obscurity. These secrets often emerge at just the right moment, their reappearance almost feeling fated, as if history itself has decided it's time for them to come to light and shape the present in ways no one could have anticipated. Even in the realm of culture, hidden stories and forgotten truths can suddenly re-emerge, altering how we see the world. A piece of history long obscured might be uncovered, changing our understanding of certain events or people. Suddenly, the past feels less certain, and with that shift comes a new perspective on current issues. Hidden truths have a way of reshaping the narrative, forcing us to reconsider what we thought we knew, and influencing the decisions we make moving forward. It's as though history is always hiding something from us, revealing only what it wants to when the time is right. What makes this all so human is that we are always living with the weight of things we don't fully understand. Secrets from the past aren't just relics. They are active forces shaping the choices we make today, whether we realize it or not. We might think we have a clear view of history, but there are always gaps, always hidden motivations and unknown decisions. And those gaps, those buried secrets, influence the present in ways that are difficult to trace but undeniable in their impact. There's a sense of mystery in it, a reminder that no matter how much we try to understand the past, it will always hold something back, keeping us tethered to it in ways we can't fully see. There's something uncanny about how certain patterns seem to play out across generations, as if time itself has a way of circling back. You see it in families, in societies, in the world at large. Certain choices, events, or conflicts that feel eerily familiar, as though history has a way of repeating itself despite all the changes that come with the passing of years. It's as if people are walking through a story they think is new, only to find that others before them have followed the same path. These recurring patterns are often invisible in the moment, but when you step back, they begin to reveal themselves, linking past and present in a strange, almost inevitable way. It's easy to imagine that we're different from those who came before us, that the choices we make now are unique to our time. But then something happens, a political upheaval, an economic crisis, or even a personal decision that feels oddly reminiscent of an earlier era. You might hear a grandparent's story or read an old newspaper and realize the struggles you're facing today were echoed in another generation's lives. It's not just the big, historical events that repeat. In smaller, more intimate ways, families seem to cycle through similar experiences. Perhaps a child rebels against a strict parent in much the same way their own parent once did. Or a career path gets chosen almost unconsciously, mimicking the footsteps of a long-gone relative. These loops aren't just coincidences. They speak to deeper rhythms of human behavior, the way we're often drawn to similar solutions, conflicts, and desires, no matter how different our circumstances seem. It's as though, despite the changing landscapes of technology, culture, and politics, the core of what drives people remains the same. And so, without realizing it, we often end up walking in circles, caught in patterns that mirror those of our ancestors. This can be comforting in some ways, offering a sense of continuity, a link to something larger than our individual lives. But it can also feel like a trap, as if no matter how much progress we think we've made, we're still bound by the same cycles of struggle and achievement. What makes these time loops or patterns so deeply human is the fact that we rarely notice them until we're already caught in them. The decisions we make feel urgent, personal, and immediate, but often they are part of a much larger web that stretches back through time. Generations before us faced similar crossroads, made similar mistakes, and found themselves in similar moments of triumph. Yet, despite all that, each time the pattern replays, it feels new to those living it. There's a sense of both mystery and frustration in this. How can the same struggles and questions arise again and again when we believe we've moved forward? Sometimes, it's not until much later, when the dust has settled and we can look back with some distance, that the patterns become clear. We realize that our battles for justice, love, or identity aren't so different from those fought by people who came before us. It's as though time loops around on itself, each generation taking its turn in the same cosmic dance. These recurring patterns don't diminish the significance of our own experiences. They deepen them, connecting us to the past in ways we can't fully understand, but can certainly feel. In the end, time isn't a straight line. It curves, bends, and circles back, pulling us into familiar rhythms, no matter how much the world changes around us. There's something haunting about how certain unexplained phenomena seem to have roots that stretch deep into the ancient past, as though the mysteries we encounter today are echoes of events that have long since faded into history. These occurrences defy easy explanation, leaving us with a sense that we're touching something much older and more elusive than we realize. Maybe it's a strange pattern in the landscape that doesn't quite match natural formations, or an ancient structure whose purpose and creators are long forgotten. We walk through modern life with the assumption that we understand the world, but every so often, something happens that challenges that assumption, hinting at knowledge or forces from a time before our own. Take, for example, the sudden appearance of strange lights in the sky, phenomena that have been recorded for centuries, described in ancient texts, carved into stone, or passed down through oral traditions. These lights, whether seen over remote mountain ranges or flickering across the night sky in places where there should be no such thing, seem to connect modern experiences with something ancient and unspoken. People today might speculate about advanced technology or atmospheric phenomena, but it's hard to shake the feeling that these sightings are somehow linked to events that took place long before anyone had words to describe them. And then there are the remnants of civilizations, their ruins standing silently in remote corners of the world, where unexplained forces seem to linger. There are places where compasses fail, where animals refuse to go, or where people report a strange feeling of being watched, even though no one is there. These sites, often tied to ancient rituals or forgotten purposes, leave behind more than stone and artifacts. They seem to carry with them a weight, a presence that defies the passage of time. We might excavate, analyze, and theorize, but there's something about these places that resists understanding, as though the past is guarding its secrets from us, allowing only glimpses of something we can't quite grasp. In some cases, natural disasters or strange weather events also appear to follow patterns that were recognized by ancient peoples but remain unexplained by modern science. The idea that the Earth itself might remember a long-forgotten event, a cataclysmic change, feels both unsettling and fascinating. Ancient texts sometimes speak of storms or quakes tied to specific events, almost as if the land responds to human actions or the alignment of celestial bodies. We might dismiss these stories as myth, but when similar phenomena occur today, seemingly without cause, there's a nagging feeling that perhaps those ancient people knew something we've since lost. Even within our bodies, there are connections to the ancient past that surface in ways we don't fully understand. Genetic memory, the idea that experiences from long-dead ancestors could somehow be passed down through generations, offers a tantalizing explanation for certain instincts or fears we carry without knowing why. Why do we feel an inexplicable dread in certain places, or a pull toward landscapes we've never seen before? Could it be that something from the distant past is alive within us, shaping our responses to the world in ways that we're not even aware of? These questions blur the line between the scientific and the mystical, leaving us to wonder how much of what we experience today is rooted in ancient occurrences, waiting for someone to recognize the pattern. In the end, these unexplained phenomena, whether they take the form of strange events in the sky, untraceable feelings of dread, or forgotten energies tied to ancient ruins, remind us that the world is far more complex than we often give it credit for. Time may march forward, but it doesn't leave everything behind. There are forces, occurrences, and memories from the ancient past that still shape our reality, lingering just out of sight, refusing to be fully understood. They are the mysteries that link us to those who came before, whispering that the past is never truly gone. It lives on in ways we can only begin to comprehend. Artifacts with mysterious origins have a way of pulling at something deep within us, stirring a curiosity that goes beyond mere historical interest. They sit in museums or private collections, their purpose and creators lost to time. Yet they hold a presence, a quiet significance that hints at stories we'll never fully know. These relics aren't just objects. They're like puzzles, incomplete pieces of a past that refuses to fit neatly into the narratives we've constructed. And it's this lack of certainty, the unspoken mystery behind them, that captures the imagination, making us feel connected to a world that has long since faded into obscurity. There's something profoundly human about our fascination with these objects. We see in them more than their material value. We sense the lives of the people who once held them, the hands that carved their intricate patterns, or the minds that dreamed them into existence. A strange tool with no clear purpose, a sculpture that doesn't fit the style of its era, or an artifact that predates known civilizations. All these relics seem to defy explanation, as though they don't quite belong in the timeline of history as we understand it. And yet, there they are, stubbornly resisting any attempt to categorize them. What draws us to these objects is the silence they embody. They don't speak, yet they provoke endless questions. Who made them? What were they for? How did they survive when everything else around them crumbled into dust? Sometimes, the mystery isn't just in the object itself, but in where it was found. An ancient map that seems to depict lands long before they were discovered by modern explorers, or a piece of technology seemingly too advanced for the culture that created it. These kinds of artifacts unsettle our sense of history. They whisper of forgotten knowledge, lost civilizations, or even possibilities that challenge what we think we know about human progress. But it's not just about challenging history, it's also about connection. These artifacts, with their strange and unknown origins, make us feel as though we're part of something bigger, something that stretches back into a time beyond memory. They remind us that we're not the first to walk this earth, that countless generations have come before, each leaving behind fragments of their world, intentionally or not. The mystery of these objects invites us to imagine those who lived in distant times, to think about what they valued, feared, and believed. In a way, these relics act as a bridge, connecting us to people who, though long dead, left behind these physical reminders of their existence. There's also a strange sense of wonder that accompanies these artifacts, a realization that, despite all our technological advancements and accumulated knowledge, there are still things we don't fully understand. We may have mapped the stars, cracked the genetic code, and sent machines to the farthest reaches of the solar system, but a single ancient artifact, with no clear explanation, can still baffle us. It's a humbling reminder that the past holds secrets we may never uncover, no matter how much we learn or how deeply we dig. In the end, these artifacts with mysterious origins don't just belong to the past. They live in the present, challenging us to look beyond what we think we know. They remind us that history is not a closed book, but a series of layers, many of which remain hidden from view. And in that uncertainty, in that tantalizing gap between what is known and what is unknown, lies the very essence of why these relics continue to captivate us. They make us wonder, they make us question, and in doing so, they keep the mysteries of the past alive, reminding us that there are always more stories waiting to be discovered, more questions to be asked. There's a sense that we're connected to something far greater than our individual selves, something that stretches back through time and binds us to the countless lives that came before. The idea of a collective consciousness suggests that we carry with us not just our own memories, but echoes of the experiences of our ancestors. It's as though, buried deep within us, are the thoughts, emotions, and lessons learned by those who walked the earth long before we were even born. This isn't about personal memories we can recall, but a shared sense of knowing, a kind of wisdom that feels like it's always been there, waiting to surface. Think about how certain instincts or feelings seem to arise out of nowhere. A place might feel familiar even though you've never been there before, or a sudden emotion sweeps over you without explanation. These moments can feel like glimpses of something much older than your own life, as if part of you is tapping into a well of experience that belongs not just to you, but to humanity as a whole. The struggles, triumphs, fears, and hopes of past generations live on, influencing the way you navigate the world, even when you're unaware of it. In every culture, there are rituals, symbols, and traditions that seem to carry this weight of ancestral memory. They endure, not just because they are passed down, but because they resonate with something deeply embedded in the human experience. It's as if we instinctively know these things hold meaning, even if we don't fully understand why. The stories of past lives, their lessons, their warnings, their hopes, are preserved in ways we can't always articulate, but we feel them, subtly guiding our thoughts and actions. This collective consciousness doesn't mean we all think or feel the same. Rather, it's a shared foundation, a kind of undercurrent that flows through generations, shaping how we experience the world. It's as if, in some small way, we carry with us the unresolved questions of the past, the unfinished dreams, the emotions that were never fully expressed. Each of us is a thread in a much larger tapestry, woven together by the lives of those who came before us. The experiences of our ancestors, though long gone, remain present, influencing us in ways we might never fully understand, but can always sense, if only faintly. There's something comforting in this idea, knowing that we're not alone in our journey through life. We are, in some way, connected to a vast network of human experience that stretches across time. It gives depth to the choices we make and the emotions we feel, reminding us that our lives are part of a much bigger story, one that began long before us and will continue long after we're gone. There are certain myths and legends that seem to linger across cultures and generations, stories passed down through time that refuse to fade. Though they may be cloaked in fantastical elements, gods, monsters, miracles, there's often a sense that beneath the surface, these tales are rooted in something real, something that once happened but became blurred as it traveled from mouth to mouth, century after century. These stories have a way of sticking with people, as if the events they reflect were so powerful, so important, that they couldn't simply be forgotten. Instead, they've survived in the only way they could, transformed into legend. What's fascinating is how these myths often seem to carry echoes of real historical events, even if the details have become exaggerated or distorted over time. Take, for instance, the story of Atlantis, a grand civilization swallowed by the sea in a single, catastrophic day. To modern ears, it sounds like pure fantasy, a tale of lost glory. But as archaeologists and historians delve deeper into ancient records, there are whispers that this legend might be connected to real events, perhaps a distant memory of a volcanic eruption or a city lost to a sudden natural disaster. The myth persists because it reflects a deeper truth about the fragility of human achievements, the way entire cultures can be swept away in an instant, leaving only stories behind. In some cases, these myths endure because they serve as a kind of collective memory for traumatic events. A village destroyed by a flood might, over time, become the tale of a great serpent rising from the waters to punish the wicked. A meteor strike might turn into the story of a vengeful god hurling fire from the sky. These legends are how people make sense of the chaos and violence of nature, shaping the incomprehensible into something that fits within the moral and spiritual framework of their time. But beneath the supernatural embellishments lies the seed of a real event, a moment in history when the ground shook, the sky darkened, or the waters rose, leaving people to grapple with forces far beyond their control. The human element in these stories is what makes them so powerful. They aren't just fantastical tales for the sake of entertainment. They are reflections of how people, centuries ago, interpreted the world around them. They reveal the hopes, fears, and values of those who lived long before us. The details may change, the characters may grow larger than life, but at the core, these myths speak to very real human experiences. They are a way for people to pass on lessons, warnings, or simply to preserve the memory of something that happened long ago. Even today, in an age of scientific understanding, these myths continue to resonate because they tap into something primal, something that transcends the specifics of time and place. Whether it's the flood myths that appear in nearly every ancient culture, reflecting a collective memory of real deluges that reshaped landscapes, or stories of lost cities like El Dorado, which may have been inspired by explorers stumbling upon forgotten civilizations, these legends endure because they touch on universal themes. They remind us that beneath all our advancements, we're still deeply connected to the people of the past, sharing the same fears of destruction and loss, the same yearning to understand the mysteries of our world. What's most striking is how, even as we uncover the historical truths that may have inspired these myths, the legends themselves remain vital. They are more than just echoes of forgotten events. They have become part of the fabric of our culture, reflecting not just what happened but how people felt about what happened. In that sense, these persistent myths aren't just about history. They are about the ongoing human need to remember, to make sense of a world that is often chaotic and unpredictable, and to find meaning in events that seem larger than life. Through them, the past lives on, not just as a record of what once was, but as a continuing story of how we, as humans, understand our place in the universe. Walking into certain places, there's a sense that the air itself carries the weight of everything that's happened there. It's as though the emotions of the people who pass through, their joys, fears, and sorrows, have seeped into the walls, the ground, and even the atmosphere, lingering long after they're gone. You might not notice it right away, but in those quiet moments, when the noise of the world fades, you can feel it. There's a heaviness in the air, a tension or calm that doesn't belong to the present moment, but to something much older. These emotional imprints seem to cling to places, etched into the fabric of the location itself, as if the emotions of countless people over centuries have left their mark in a way that transcends time. It's often in places of deep historical significance that this sensation becomes most palpable. A battlefield, centuries old, may have been turned into a peaceful park, but when you stand there, it's hard to ignore the sense of unease, as though the ground remembers the conflict, the fear, and the loss. Or perhaps it's a forgotten corner of a once grand building, where you suddenly feel an overwhelming sense of sadness, even though you have no reason to. It's not just a matter of imagining the past. It's something more visceral, something you feel in your gut before your mind catches up. These emotional imprints seem to speak to you in a language beyond words, telling stories that are too deep, too raw to be captured by history books. What makes it so profoundly human is that we all seem to recognize these feelings, even if we don't fully understand them. You might walk into an ancient cathedral, and though you've never been there before, you feel a sense of awe or peace, not because of the grandeur of the architecture, but because of the centuries of devotion, hope, and even desperation that have filled that space. It's as if the collective emotions of the people who prayed, grieved, and celebrated there have soaked into the very stones, leaving behind an invisible residue that touches everyone who enters. You may not know the specific stories, but the emotions are undeniable, a silent connection to all those who stood in that place before you. There's something almost unsettling about the way these emotional imprints linger, particularly in places marked by tragedy or hardship. You might visit an old prison or a site of past violence and feel a sense of dread or heaviness that you can't shake. Even in the absence of visible scars, the emotions of those who suffered there remain, hanging in the air like a shadow you can't see but can feel pressing down on you. It's as though the place itself has absorbed their pain, carrying it forward through time, so that even generations later, it's still present, still alive in a way. These emotional imprints remind us that places are more than just physical locations. They hold memories, not just of events, but of the human experiences tied to those events. They become more than just landmarks. They are silent witnesses to the full spectrum of human emotion, carrying those feelings forward in ways that affect us without us even realizing it. The power of these imprints lies in their invisibility, in how they quietly shape our reactions and emotions without explanation. They blur the lines between past and present, pulling us into a shared experience that transcends the boundaries of time, making us feel connected to those who came before in ways that are impossible to fully explain but impossible to ignore. Time travel paradoxes have fascinated humanity for as long as the concept of time travel itself has existed. It's a strange, almost impossible idea that we could slip out of the grip of time, move forward or backward as we please, and yet the very thought of doing so twists our understanding of reality. There's something deeply unsettling, but also intriguing, about how one small change in the past could ripple out into something catastrophic or absurd in the future. The idea messes with your mind, making you question the nature of causality, of fate, of whether our actions are ever really ours, or if they're just part of some endless loop we're unaware of. Imagine meeting your younger self and the emotional weight of telling them about the hardships they're going to face, knowing that you can't change any of it without risking your own existence. It's maddening to think of how fragile reality becomes when time is no longer a fixed, linear path, but a chaotic web of possibilities, contradictions, and impossibilities. It's not just science that gets tangled here, but our very sense of identity. If you went back and changed one tiny thing, say, convinced your parents to move to another town, would you even still be you? Or would the new life you created with that change produce someone entirely different? And if so, what happens to the you that existed before that change? Does that person just disappear, never to have been at all? These aren't just hypothetical questions. They cut to the heart of how we understand ourselves in relation to the world. The notion that we could undo or rewrite parts of our lives, or even the lives of others, forces us to confront the uncomfortable idea that everything we've been through, everything we've experienced, could be erased in an instant by someone else's meddling. And then there's the sheer horror of paradoxes like the grandfather paradox, where you could theoretically go back and prevent your own existence by stopping your grandparents from meeting. It's such a mind-bending scenario because it leaves you in a space where logic seems to break down completely. How can you exist to go back in time if you prevent yourself from being born? Yet the paradox exists in so many stories and theories, teasing us with its impossibility, daring us to try and make sense of something that is fundamentally unsolvable. It speaks to a deeper fear we all have, that no matter how much we think we understand the universe, there are forces and principles at work that are beyond our control, maybe even beyond our comprehension. There's also something oddly emotional about these paradoxes. What if you went back and witnessed the death of someone you loved, knowing full well that saving them could unravel everything you know? Would you be able to resist the urge to intervene, knowing that the entire future could be at risk? Time travel paradoxes bring out these deeply human dilemmas, testing our morals and our resilience in the face of impossible choices. The very fact that we can't answer these questions in a satisfying way adds to the allure of the paradoxes. They linger in the mind, reminding us that time, something so deeply embedded in our lives, isn't as straightforward as we'd like to believe. It's as though the rules we've always taken for granted could fall apart at any moment, if only we had the means to push them far enough. In every time travel story or theory, there's always that underlying thread of helplessness, a reminder that no matter how much we dream of controlling time, of bending it to our will, it will always resist us. You can't change the past without erasing the present, and you can't move into the future without dragging all your decisions along with you. The paradoxes force us to face the fact that we are trapped in time's flow, and that our desire to escape it will only ever lead us into deeper, more confusing territory. It's a maze with no clear exits, only more twists, turns, and dead ends. And yet, we can't stop ourselves from exploring it, because the idea of breaking free from time's grip is too tempting to ignore, even when we know the consequences could be far beyond what we could ever handle. Historical hauntings have always captivated people because they offer a strange blend of the past and present colliding in ways that are both eerie and fascinating. There's something about the idea that a place, an object, or even a person could hold onto the energy of a moment long after it has ended. It makes you wonder about the weight of emotions and experiences, as if certain events are just too powerful to simply fade away with time. You start to see these stories of hauntings not as simple ghost tales, but as echoes of things unresolved, emotions left hanging in the air like a scent that never dissipates. It makes you think about how history is more than just facts or dates. It's the residue of real lives lived, sometimes with such intensity that it refuses to be forgotten. It's a reminder that while we may move on, the places we leave behind can still carry the imprints of who we were. What makes historical hauntings so compelling is how deeply personal they often feel, even if they're tied to events that happened long before we were born. There's something incredibly human about the desire for closure, and ghost stories often speak to that need. Maybe it's the spirit of a soldier, still standing guard centuries after the war has ended, because they never had a chance to lay down their arms. Or a woman who lost everything to tragedy, and her grief lingers in the halls of an old house like a shadow, a presence you can feel but never quite see. These aren't just random specters, they're symbols of lives interrupted, of people who didn't get to finish their stories. And when you step into one of those places, it's hard not to feel the weight of that history pressing down, like you're not just walking through a building or across a field, but through someone else's unfinished chapter. We're drawn to these haunted places because they make the past feel alive in a way that books and museums never can. When you hear the creak of a floorboard in an old, empty house or catch a fleeting movement out of the corner of your eye, it's as if time itself has loosened its grip for just a moment. For a brief second, you're not in the present anymore. You're somewhere in between, connected to a history that's still playing out in some strange, otherworldly way. It makes you question the very nature of time, of memory, and whether the things we leave behind ever truly disappear. Maybe the walls of that ancient castle really do hold onto the screams of those who suffered within them. Or perhaps the fields where battles were fought retain the fear and pain of those who died there. It's unsettling to think that strong emotions could leave a mark on the world itself, but at the same time, it's undeniably compelling. Historical hauntings also force us to consider our own relationship with death and the afterlife. If there really are spirits from the past trapped in our world, what does that say about what comes next? Are they stuck, caught between two worlds, or are they simply figments of our imagination, brought to life by the powerful stories we tell ourselves about the past? Maybe it's both. Perhaps the human mind, desperate to make sense of the unknown, creates these apparitions as a way to explain the inexplicable. But even if that's the case, the fact that these stories have persisted for centuries says something about our deep-rooted need to feel connected to those who came before us. We want to believe that they're still out there, still watching, still feeling, even if it's in some distant, ghostly form. There's also an undeniable sadness to historical hauntings. They remind us that life doesn't always give people the endings they deserve. The idea of a ghost wandering endlessly, replaying the same moment over and over, is haunting not just because of the supernatural element, but because it reflects something deeply human. Our fear of being forgotten, of having our stories erased or left unresolved. It's why so many ghost stories revolve around some kind of unfinished business. The spirit lingers because something was left undone, something important was never said, or a wrong was never righted. In a way, these hauntings are a metaphor for our own struggles with closure and acceptance. We project these stories onto old buildings and dark hallways because, deep down, we all understand what it feels like to carry unresolved feelings, or to fear that our lives won't leave the mark we hope they will. At the core of historical hauntings is this constant tension between what's gone and what remains. The buildings, the objects, the landscapes, they all stay, while the people who lived through history fade away. And yet, in these stories of hauntings, it's as if those people never really left. They continue to walk through the same doorways, sit by the same windows, watch from the same shadows. It's both comforting and disturbing, the thought that we're never truly alone, even when we think we are. In a way, these hauntings remind us that the past is never quite as distant as we like to believe. It's always there, just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to remind us that history is not just something we study. It's something that lingers, haunting us in ways both literal and metaphorical. Ancestral memory is one of those concepts that feels both familiar and strange, almost as if it's something we've always known deep down but rarely stop to think about. It's the idea that parts of our ancestors' lives, their experiences, their struggles, and even their triumphs, have somehow been passed down to us, embedded in our very DNA. You might find yourself drawn to certain places or feel a strange sense of déjà vu in situations that you've never actually lived through but that your ancestors might have. It's like carrying invisible luggage, not always heavy, but undeniably present, a silent companion that travels with you through life. This notion that we're more than just the sum of our own experiences, that we're tied to the lives of those who came before us, adds layers of complexity to our identity. It's as though we're haunted, not by ghosts, but by echoes of lives long past, lives that shape us in ways we can't fully understand. There's something profoundly human about this. We often feel a deep, unexplainable connection to traditions, places, or stories from our family's past, even if they happened generations before we were born. It's like an invisible thread tying us to our lineage, pulling us towards certain instincts or reactions that have no logical basis in our own lives. Why does someone feel a particular affinity for the sea when they've grown up nowhere near it? Why does another person have a visceral reaction to war stories, even if they've never seen a battlefield? Ancestral memory, though not something we can easily measure or define, suggests that the experiences of our forebears have left an imprint on us, a genetic or spiritual memory that colors the way we see the world, even if we don't fully recognize it. What's fascinating is how ancestral memory can influence us in subtle, almost unconscious ways. It's in the way we carry ourselves, the fears we can't quite explain, or the strengths that seem to surface when we need them most. Some scientists argue that trauma, particularly intense or generational trauma, can be passed down, leaving a mark on the descendants of those who lived through it. So the anxiety you feel in certain situations might not be entirely yours. It could be the echo of something your ancestors endured, a survival instinct passed down as a kind of protective inheritance. It's both comforting and unsettling to think that the emotions we feel today might be linked to experiences that are not our own, but that were essential for our ancestors' survival. It adds a layer of depth to our understanding of human resilience, showing us that survival isn't just a personal battle, but a collective, inherited one. And yet, ancestral memory isn't just about the bad stuff. It's about the strengths, too. the instincts to protect, to nurture, to create. These are qualities that have been honed over countless generations and passed down to us, even if we don't always recognize them for what they are. It's why we might feel an overwhelming need to protect family traditions, even if we don't fully understand their origins. These customs, these pieces of wisdom, have survived through the ages because they meant something to those who came before us. Whether it's a recipe passed down from a great-grandmother or a piece of advice that seems oddly timeless, these fragments of the past are like little messages from our ancestors, subtle reminders of where we came from and what we've been through as a lineage. The idea of ancestral memory also touches on the deep connection we feel to our heritage, even when we don't know much about it. There's a certain sadness in not knowing the full story of your ancestors, yet a persistent feeling that their lives somehow inform your own. It's as if we carry fragments of their stories within us, incomplete but still meaningful. You might not know the names or faces of those who lived centuries ago, but you can feel their influence in the traditions your family keeps, the values they pass down, and the stories they tell, whether spoken or unspoken. It creates a sense of belonging, a feeling that we are part of something bigger than ourselves, connected not just to the people we know, but to a vast, unseen network of lives that stretches back through time. Ancestral memory also complicates the way we think about free will and individuality. We like to believe that we're in control of our own destinies, that we shape our lives through our own choices and experiences. But when you consider the possibility that we are shaped not just by our immediate environment, but by the accumulated experiences of generations past, it forces you to reconsider that sense of autonomy. Maybe we're not as free as we think. Maybe, in some ways, we're living out the stories of those who came before us, carrying their hopes, fears, and unresolved struggles as part of our own lives. It's both humbling and disorienting, realizing that your life isn't just your own but a continuation of countless lives that have led to this moment. Yet, at the same time, it gives a sense of continuity, of purpose. We're not just isolated individuals. We're part of a larger story, one that has been unfolding for centuries and will continue long after we're gone. There's also an undeniable beauty in the idea that we carry pieces of our ancestors within us. It suggests that even when people are gone, they're never truly lost. Their lives, their experiences, their essence live on, not in some abstract way, but in the very fabric of who we are. It's why we might find ourselves following in the footsteps of those who came before us, whether we intend to or not. It's why certain patterns or traits seem to resurface across generations, as if the past is whispering through us, reminding us of where we come from and what we're made of. Ancestral memory is, in a way, a quiet kind of immortality, a way for people, even long after they've passed, to remain a part of the world, influencing the future through the lives of their descendants. There's something haunting about the idea of forgotten civilizations, entire societies that once thrived but have since faded into obscurity, leaving behind only fragments of their existence. It's hard not to feel a deep sense of curiosity mixed with sadness when you think about these lost worlds, their people, their cultures, and their stories that are now barely remembered, if at all. It makes you realize how fragile human history can be, how even the greatest cities and empires can crumble into dust and be swallowed by time. The ruins they leave behind, crumbling walls, ancient roads, weathered carvings, are like distant echoes, hints of lives that were once as vivid and real as ours, but now only exist as puzzles for archaeologists to piece together. And yet, there's a mystery to it that draws us in, this urge to connect the dots of what happened and who these people were, as if understanding them might help us understand something essential about ourselves. When you look at the remains of these forgotten civilizations, there's a sense of awe in realizing that they were once the center of someone's world. These were places where people laughed, cried, built, dreamed, and loved. They had beliefs, customs, technologies, and languages, most of which are lost to us now. And yet, we still feel a connection to them, even though they're from another time, another reality altogether. It's like walking through the ruins of an ancient city and feeling that, in some intangible way, you're not just seeing stones and broken pottery. You're standing in the shadow of lives that shaped the course of history, even if their names have been erased. There's something deeply human about wanting to uncover those stories, to make sense of what was left behind, as if by reconstructing the past, we can somehow bridge the gap between their world and ours. What makes forgotten civilizations so compelling is that they remind us of our own impermanence. No matter how advanced a society becomes, no matter how invincible it might seem in its time, it can all be lost. The civilizations that once ruled vast stretches of the earth with great power and influence are now reduced to ruins, and it makes you think about the cyclical nature of history. Every empire, every city, every culture rises, flourishes, and eventually falls. It's inevitable, and yet, in that falling, there's a strange kind of immortality. Even when the people are gone and their cities have crumbled, the remnants of what they built remain, stubbornly resisting complete oblivion. These ruins, these artifacts, they hold onto a piece of that past, as if to say that while the civilization may be forgotten, it's not entirely lost. There's also a sense of wonder in imagining what these civilizations must have been like in their prime. How did they live? What did they believe? What did they think about the world around them? It's easy to romanticize the past, to imagine that these forgotten peoples possessed some ancient wisdom that we, in our modern world, have lost. And maybe, in some ways, they did. Their architecture, art, and engineering still impress us today, even though we don't fully understand how they achieved some of their feats. The precision of ancient structures, the beauty of their art, the complexity of their societies, they all suggest that these were not primitive peoples, but highly sophisticated ones, living in a way that we can only glimpse through the fragments they left behind. And it's in those glimpses that we find both fascination and frustration. For every piece of pottery, every carved stone, there are 100 questions that will likely never be answered. Yet forgotten civilizations also speak to something deep within us, the fear of being forgotten. It's hard not to look at the ruins of a once great city and wonder, will that be us one day? Will everything we've built, everything we've achieved, eventually be reduced to ruins, buried under the sands of time, forgotten by the future? It's a sobering thought, one that forces us to confront the fleeting nature of our own existence. But at the same time, there's a kind of beauty in it. Even though these civilizations are forgotten, they left something behind. They left their mark, however small, on the world. And in that way, they're not entirely gone. Their legacy, even if it's just a pile of stones or a broken vase, still exists, still speaks to us across the ages. There's also a sense of loss when thinking about what was destroyed or forgotten. How many innovations, ideas, or works of art were lost when these civilizations fell? What kind of knowledge, insights, or philosophies disappeared into the void of time, never to be rediscovered? It's almost painful to think about the vast amount of human potential that was extinguished with the collapse of these societies. The libraries that burned, the records that were erased, the stories that were never told. It's as if we'll never fully understand the richness of what was lost. And yet, that loss is also what makes these civilizations so endlessly fascinating. There's always more to discover, always more to learn. Every new excavation, every new artifact uncovered, feels like a small victory in the battle against time. A glimpse into a world that was once as real and vibrant as our own. But perhaps the most profound thing about forgotten civilizations is that they remind us of the continuity of human experience. Despite the vast distances of time and culture that separate us, there's something fundamentally relatable about these ancient peoples. They were, after all, humans just like us, trying to make sense of the world, trying to survive, trying to create something lasting. And in that sense, their story is our story. We may not know their names or understand their languages, but the drive to build, to explore, to leave something behind, that's something that transcends time. Forgotten civilizations, in their quiet, ruined state, remind us that we are part of a much larger human story, one that stretches back thousands of years and will continue long after we're gone. They are a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, even in the face of inevitable decline. There's something deeply unsettling about the thought of lost knowledge from ancient cultures, as if humanity's collective wisdom has been fractured, with pieces forever missing. It's a bit like staring at a half-finished puzzle, knowing that some of the most crucial parts have disappeared and will never be found again. The knowledge that ancient cultures once possessed wasn't just about survival or daily life. It often touched on profound questions about existence, medicine, engineering, and the cosmos. We like to think of ourselves as being at the pinnacle of progress, but the fact is that these ancient civilizations, with all their now forgotten techniques and understandings, were capable of things that continue to baffle us today. Their achievements sit there, hidden beneath layers of time, as reminders that what we think of as innovation might sometimes be rediscovery. There's a real sense of loss when you consider what might have been erased, either by natural disasters, war, or simply the slow erosion of time. Entire libraries have burned to the ground, like the infamous Library of Alexandria, taking with them centuries of knowledge and insight into the human condition and the natural world. It's hard not to wonder what was lost in those fires. Treatises on medicine, the stars, engineering feats we still don't fully understand. What if they had answers to questions we're still asking today? What if their understanding of the human body, or the cosmos, or the Earth, had insights that could reshape our modern worldview? It's a frustrating thought, the sense that progress isn't always linear, that humanity might have lost crucial steps along the way, and we're stumbling forward in the dark, unaware of the wisdom that could have been passed down if only we had preserved it. When we look at the remnants of their inventions, their architecture, their astronomical knowledge, it's impossible not to feel humbled. How did ancient peoples move massive stones to build pyramids? How did they chart the stars with such accuracy? And how did they develop medicines and technologies without what we now consider the basic tools of science? These questions linger, unanswered, because so much of their knowledge wasn't written down or preserved in ways we could comprehend. Oral traditions, passed down through generations, have faded into oblivion, taking with them the secret practices and solutions that allowed ancient cultures to thrive in environments that would challenge us even today. The thought that there might be herbal remedies, agricultural techniques, or even lost sciences buried under centuries of dust is both exciting and tragic, a reminder of how fragile human knowledge really is. What makes it even more poignant is the way this lost knowledge hints at how advanced these cultures might have been, far beyond the simple, primitive societies we sometimes imagine them to be. The idea that they had cures for ailments, that they understood the movements of the heavens, that they could manipulate their environment in ways we can't even begin to replicate. It's enough to make you reconsider the narrative of human progress altogether. Maybe we aren't as advanced as we like to think. Maybe, in some ways, we've regressed, lost the thread of a deeper understanding that ancient peoples had access to. It's not just about building things. It's about a worldview, a way of seeing the world that might have been more holistic, more connected to nature, and more in tune with forces that we now dismiss or overlook in our rush toward modernity. In this way, the loss of ancient knowledge isn't just a loss of facts or data, it's the loss of perspective. Ancient cultures saw the world differently, and their knowledge systems were often intertwined with their spiritual and philosophical beliefs. To lose their knowledge is, in a sense, to lose access to an entire way of thinking, a way that might have had a more integrated, balanced approach to life than our own. We live in a world of specialization and compartmentalization, where science and spirituality are often seen as opposing forces. But for many ancient peoples, these two were inseparable, and their understanding of the world reflected that unity. They might have had insights into health, nature, and the cosmos that we're missing precisely because we don't approach these subjects with the same openness or reverence that they did. What's especially haunting is the idea that some of this knowledge might be gone forever, but traces of it still exist, hidden in myths, legends, or even artifacts that we haven't yet deciphered. Every now and then, archaeologists make discoveries that challenge our assumptions about what ancient cultures knew or were capable of. Whether it's the Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek analog computer, or the Nazca lines in Peru, these relics of the past suggest that we've only scratched the surface of what our ancestors were capable of. And for every discovery like that, you have to wonder how much more is out there, just waiting to be uncovered. Or worse, how much was lost before we even had a chance to find it. The realization that knowledge can be lost so easily forces us to think about our own time in a different light. Will future generations look back at us and wonder what we knew, what we understood, that they've somehow lost in the passage of time? What will happen to our libraries, our databases, our collective wisdom when natural disasters or wars inevitably strike again? The fragility of knowledge, its susceptibility to being forgotten or destroyed, makes it all the more valuable. But it also makes you wonder just how much of what we take for granted today might one day be seen as lost knowledge. Ancient cultures remind us that no civilization is immune to the ravages of time, and that the wisdom we think will last forever can be erased in an instant, leaving future generations to pick up the pieces and wonder about what they will never know. In the end, lost knowledge from ancient cultures isn't just about history. It's about what we've missed out on, what we'll never fully understand, and what that loss means for our own pursuit of wisdom. It's a sobering reminder that knowledge is fragile, that progress isn't guaranteed, and that the past holds secrets we may never fully unravel. But it's also a testament to the resilience of human curiosity, the drive to keep searching, to keep piecing together the puzzle of who we are and where we come from. In a way, the very act of searching for this lost knowledge is a kind of tribute to the ancients themselves, a way of keeping their memory alive, even if we can never fully recover what they knew. Archaeological mysteries have a way of pulling you into a world where answers feel just out of reach, and the more you learn, the less certain everything becomes. They remind us that history isn't as neatly packaged as we like to think, and that for every stone we turn over, there are countless questions waiting underneath. There's something innately human about this search for answers, this drive to uncover what's been buried for centuries, sometimes millennia, knowing that the artifacts we find are only fragments of much larger, more complex stories. It's a humbling process, really, because it shows just how much we don't know, how much of the past has slipped through our fingers. These mysteries, be they ancient structures, unexplained artifacts, or entire civilizations that vanished without a trace, leave us wondering not just about the people who came before us, but about our own limited understanding of the world. Take, for example, the Great Sphinx of Giza. We know it's ancient, but exactly how ancient? Some theories suggest it's far older than we currently believe, predating the Egyptian civilization itself. It's not just the age that's puzzling, though. It's the purpose, the reason it was carved with such precision out of solid rock. What was it guarding? Or what story was it meant to tell? And then there's the question of who really built it. Was it the Egyptians we know? Or was there a civilization that came before? One that left no other trace but this massive, enigmatic monument? It's like the Sphinx is silently laughing at us, keeping its secrets close, daring us to figure it out while we stumble around with theories that might not even be close to the truth. Another one of those archaeological puzzles that refuses to be fully solved is the Nazca lines in Peru. These massive geoglyphs, etched into the earth in the shapes of animals, plants, and geometric patterns, can only truly be seen from the sky, which makes you wonder, how could an ancient people have designed something so elaborate without any ability to view it from above? The lines seem to defy explanation. Were they made for the gods, messages written in the earth for celestial beings to observe from the heavens? Or did the Nazca people have some other, more practical reason for creating these enormous designs that we simply can't comprehend from our modern perspective? It's maddening, really, because the lines are there, right in front of us, but they refuse to give up their meaning. Every time we think we've got a handle on it, new theories arise, pushing the answers further away. And then there's the mystery of the Antikythera mechanism, this ancient device discovered in the wreckage of a ship off the coast of Greece. It's often called the world's first analog computer, but that barely scratches the surface of how mind-boggling it truly is. The mechanism, with its intricate gears and dials, was clearly used to track celestial movements, but the level of engineering it required seems almost impossible for the time. How did they know how to build something so precise? And why does it seem so far ahead of anything else from that era? It feels like a glimpse into a lost chapter of human knowledge, one where our ancestors understood far more about mathematics, astronomy, and engineering than we've given them credit for. And yet, we can only guess at what else they knew, what other inventions or understandings have been lost to the depths of history, possibly lying at the bottom of the sea like the Antikythera mechanism once was. There's also something deeply eerie about the lost city of Mohenjo-daro, one of the main cities of the Indus Valley civilization, which flourished around 4,500 years ago. Its perfectly planned streets, advanced drainage systems, and public baths suggest a highly organized, sophisticated society. But then, without warning, it was abandoned. No one knows why. Was it climate change, an invasion, or something else entirely? There's no clear evidence of a violent end, and the disappearance of this entire civilization remains one of archaeology's greatest unsolved riddles. It's unsettling to think that an entire culture could just vanish, leaving behind only ruins that hint at a life we can barely grasp, a world that seems familiar yet so impossibly distant at the same time. The mystery deepens when you consider the cryptic inscriptions and languages that we've yet to decipher. The Phaistos disc, a circular piece of fired clay discovered on the Greek island of Crete, is covered in symbols that no one has been able to decode. It's frustratingly close to being understood, but just far enough out of reach that it feels like it's taunting us. Is it an ancient form of writing, a religious artifact, or something entirely different? Whatever its purpose, it's remained a mystery for over a century, and with each passing year, it seems less likely that we'll ever crack its code. The same goes for the Indus script, the writing system of the Indus Valley civilization, which has never been deciphered. Without understanding their language, we're left piecing together their lives from fragments, guessing at the meaning behind their artifacts without ever being able to fully comprehend their thoughts, their stories, or their wisdom. It's not just the ancient artifacts themselves that fascinate us, though. It's the very idea that entire chapters of human history are missing, either buried beneath the earth or lost forever to the ravages of time. These archaeological mysteries are a reminder of how fragile our understanding of the past really is, how easily knowledge can be wiped away, leaving us to fumble in the dark. Every new discovery is a window into a world we can never fully know, a glimpse of something larger and more complex than we might ever be able to grasp. Yet, despite the frustration of not having all the answers, there's something undeniably exciting about the pursuit itself, about the possibility that the next dig, the next artifact, could finally unlock one of these age-old mysteries. It's the hope that keeps us searching, that keeps us wondering, and that ultimately connects us to the people who lived long before us, their lives still shrouded in the mysteries they left behind. The concept of reincarnation and past lives stirs something deep within, as if it touches on an ancient memory buried beneath layers of our conscious existence. It's hard to ignore the allure of the idea that who we are now is just one chapter in a much larger, ongoing narrative, that our current life is but a brief pause in an eternal journey stretching back through time. It's a thought that both comforts and unsettles. On the one hand, reincarnation offers a kind of continuity, a reassurance that death isn't the end, just a transition, and that the people we've been, the lives we've lived, still exist somewhere, woven into the fabric of our current reality. On the other hand, it can make you question everything. If we've lived before, who were we? What do we know? And why don't we remember? There's something haunting about the notion that the struggles, the fears, the dreams we carry now might not just be our own, but the echoes of lives long gone. Are the phobias and inexplicable longings we have now remnants of past experiences? Could a fear of water stem from drowning centuries ago? Or an irrational attachment to a place be the result of having lived there in another time? These questions stir the imagination, blurring the line between myth and reality, leaving us to wonder what it means to truly know ourselves. If reincarnation is real, then our sense of self becomes far more complex than we ever imagined. We are not just the sum of our current experiences, but a culmination of many lives, each one contributing to the person we are today, even if we don't consciously remember them. There are countless stories of people who claim to have memories of past lives, details of people, places, and events that they couldn't possibly have known in this lifetime. Children who recall vivid details about lives they supposedly lived decades, even centuries ago, often leave skeptics stumped. It's hard to dismiss the strange coincidences, the unexplainable knowledge, and the sense of deep familiarity with a time or place they've never visited. These stories, while often met with skepticism, feed into the larger narrative that perhaps we are more than just our current existence, that life itself is far more cyclical and interconnected than we can comprehend. Reincarnation also brings up questions about karma and purpose. If we've lived before, are we here to correct past mistakes, to learn lessons we failed to grasp in previous lifetimes? It's a daunting thought, the idea that our actions now could reverberate through future lives, shaping who we become next. It's not just about what happens after death, but about how our choices in this life ripple out, influencing not just our own future, but possibly the futures of others we've shared past lives with. Are the people we encounter in this life connected to us from previous ones? Do we meet certain souls again and again, bound by unresolved ties or shared destinies, working through our collective lessons over the course of many lifetimes? These questions add a layer of depth to our relationships, making us wonder if every interaction has far greater significance than we realize. Then there's the idea that past lives might offer us answers to the mysteries we face in this one. Some believe that through techniques like past life regression, we can tap into memories from our previous incarnations to gain insight into who we are today. Whether it's through hypnosis or meditation, people have reported accessing memories of other lives, finding connections between their past selves and their present struggles. It's a compelling thought that the answers to our most persistent problems might lie not in the future, but in the past, in the lives we've already lived and the experiences we've already endured. Reincarnation challenges the way we think about time itself. If life is a continuous cycle of death and rebirth, then perhaps time isn't as linear as we've been taught to believe. Instead of a straight line from birth to death, it becomes a spiral, looping back on itself, with the past, present, and future all interconnected in ways we can't fully understand. This cyclical view of existence offers a kind of hope, a sense that even when things seem bleak, there is always another chance, another life waiting to be lived. It suggests that growth and transformation are eternal processes, that no matter how many mistakes we make, there is always the possibility of redemption, of moving closer to some higher understanding with each new incarnation. What makes the idea of reincarnation so powerful is that it's deeply personal. It's not just about grand philosophical ideas or abstract concepts. It's about you, your life, your story. It invites you to look inward, to consider the possibility that you are more than just this moment, more than just this lifetime. It makes you wonder about the choices you've made, the people you've loved, the places that feel strangely familiar even though you've never been there. It makes you question what lies beyond the veil of death and whether your consciousness, your essence, will carry on, taking on new forms, new faces, and new stories in the lives to come. And while we may never have concrete proof of reincarnation, the mystery of it endures. It's a concept that transcends culture and time, found in ancient philosophies and religions across the world. Whether it's the Hindu belief in samsara, the Tibetan Buddhist concept of the bardo, or the whispers of past lives in modern-day stories, the idea of reincarnation touches something primal in the human spirit. It speaks to our innate desire for continuity, for understanding, for the idea that our existence is part of something much larger than ourselves. And in that way, even without definitive answers, reincarnation remains a powerful, enduring mystery, one that invites us to explore the deepest questions of life, death, and what might come after. The influence of myths on modern society is something that feels both subtle and profound, shaping the way we think, act, and understand the world around us in ways we often don't even realize. Even though we live in a time dominated by science, technology, and rational thought, myths still echo through our daily lives, clinging to our cultural narratives like a persistent shadow from the past. It's not just about ancient tales from long-gone civilizations, either. It's about how those stories have seeped into our modern consciousness, influencing everything from our literature and movies to our politics and personal beliefs. Myths aren't just dusty relics. They're living, breathing parts of our collective psyche, constantly evolving, adapting, and finding new ways to resonate with us in the present. Think about the stories we tell in our movies, books, and TV shows. So many of them are rooted in age-old myths, reworked for a contemporary audience, but carrying the same core ideas. The archetype of the hero's journey, first laid out in ancient epics like Homer's Odyssey or the myth of Hercules, is still the foundation of most blockbuster films today. The notion of a hero setting out on a quest, facing insurmountable odds, and returning changed, stronger, wiser, is a story that we've been telling for thousands of years. It's not just because it makes for good entertainment. It's because those ancient stories speak to something deeper within us, a fundamental understanding of growth, struggle, and transformation that transcends time and place. We see ourselves in these characters, whether it's Luke Skywalker, Katniss Everdeen, or any number of other modern protagonists who echo the heroes of myth. But it's not just in the stories we tell for fun. Myths have a way of creeping into our social and political narratives as well. National myths, for example, are still very much alive, shaping the way countries view themselves and their place in the world. The idea of American exceptionalism, the belief that the United States has a unique destiny to lead and shape the world, is deeply rooted in mythological thinking. It's a modern-day version of the myth of the chosen people, a story as old as civilization itself, one that's been retold by countless cultures in different forms. And it's not just America. Every nation, to some degree, has its own myth, its own story about its origins, its values, and its destiny, often casting itself in the role of the hero fighting against the forces of chaos or evil. On a more personal level, myths influence the way we view ourselves and our place in the world. The concept of the self-made person, for example, is deeply rooted in myth. It's the modern equivalent of the hero myth, the idea that through sheer willpower and determination, anyone can rise above their circumstances and achieve greatness. It's a powerful narrative, one that fuels the dreams of countless individuals striving for success. But like many myths, it's also oversimplified, often ignoring the complexities and nuances of real life. It can be inspiring, yes, but it can also be limiting, setting up unrealistic expectations and leaving people feeling like failures when they don't live up to the myth. Yet, despite its flaws, it persists because it taps into that age-old desire to overcome, to be more than what we are, to shape our own destiny. And then there are the myths that shape our moral values, the stories that help us define what's right and wrong, what's good and evil. The idea of cosmic justice, the belief that good will ultimately triumph over evil, is one of the most persistent myths in human history, and it continues to shape the way we think about justice in modern society. Whether we're talking about the legal system, social movements, or personal ethics, there's this underlying belief that wrongdoers will eventually get their comeuppance, that fairness will prevail, even if it takes time. It's a comforting idea, one that helps us make sense of the world's injustices, but like many myths, it's more aspirational than factual. The real world is far more complex and often unjust, but the myth of cosmic justice gives us something to strive for, a narrative framework that helps us make sense of the chaos around us. Even in science and technology, realms we often think of as purely rational, myths find a way to influence our thinking. The myth of progress, for example, the idea that humanity is constantly moving forward, improving, and advancing, is one of the most deeply ingrained stories in modern society. It's what drives innovation, fuels our fascination with technology, and gives us hope for the future. But it's also a myth in the sense that it simplifies a much more complicated reality. Progress isn't always linear, and not every technological advance leads to a better world. Yet, we cling to this story because it gives us a sense of direction, a belief that no matter how chaotic the present may seem, the future will be better. Ultimately, the enduring influence of myths on modern society speaks to something fundamentally human. We crave stories, not just for entertainment, but to make sense of the world, to give meaning to our experiences, and to find our place in the larger narrative of existence. Myths, whether ancient or modern, are the lenses through which we view reality. They provide us with frameworks for understanding everything from personal identity to global events, and even though we may think we've outgrown them, they're still very much alive, guiding us, shaping us, and sometimes even deceiving us. It's a reminder that, no matter how far we've come, we're still deeply connected to the stories of our ancestors, still searching for meaning in the myths they left behind. A time capsule is more than just a box of forgotten relics. It's a bridge between two worlds. Each item inside carries the weight of a story, not just of the past, but of the hands that placed it there, hoping for connection across time. As you imagine the moment the capsule is sealed, there's something intimate in that act, an acknowledgement that life, as we know it, will someday be history. People who create time capsules aren't merely preserving objects. They are curating the future's understanding of the present, leaving behind traces of their world, their hopes, and their daily lives. When these capsules are opened, they reveal the human experience frozen in time. Photographs fade, letters yellow, but the meaning of these objects grows richer with the passing of years. These pieces of the past tell us what mattered to the people who lived before us. Sometimes it's the trivial things, a toy, a coin, a newspaper headline, that resonate most. They remind us that, no matter how different life might have been, the essence of human existence, joy, fear, curiosity, remains the same. There's something almost haunting about the silence between the sealing of the capsule and the day it's reopened. Decades, maybe even centuries, pass without a sound. But when that seal is broken, the echoes of the past spill out, inviting us into the world that once was. It's as if the people who placed those objects knew they'd be gone, but hoped their voices would carry forward through the things they left behind. What's fascinating is the unpredictability of what's found inside. What might have been ordinary then can feel like a revelation now. An old postcard might offer a glimpse into forgotten streets. A personal letter might capture a fleeting emotion, frozen like an artifact of human connection. The items chosen reflect not just a snapshot of history, but the intimate thoughts of those who believed in the future enough to leave something for it. Time capsules are often buried with a sense of optimism, an idea that the future will still care about who we were. It's a testament to our belief that no matter how far ahead we imagine, someone will be there to unearth our past and feel the humanity that still lives within it. History isn't just a sequence of events written in books. It's something deeper, a shared undercurrent that flows through generations. The idea of the collective unconscious suggests that beneath the surface of individual experience, there's a reservoir of memories, symbols, and instincts passed down through time. This isn't a conscious remembering, like recalling a date or a specific event, but more like an echo that resonates within each of us, a shared heritage of thoughts, fears, and hopes. It's as if humanity carries fragments of its past, not just in stories and traditions, but in the very structure of our minds. When we look at history, we often focus on what happened, the wars, the revolutions, the triumphs. But beneath all of that lies a more subtle connection. The collective unconscious might explain why certain symbols, myths, and archetypes recur across cultures and eras, as if they are embedded in the very essence of who we are. These recurring themes, like the hero's journey or the fear of the unknown, tap into something ancient, a part of us that's been there since the earliest days of human existence. Imagine standing at the crossroads of past and present, feeling that pull from long ago, something unspoken yet familiar. This is the collective unconscious at work, a reminder that the lives of those before us continue to shape us, even in ways we cannot fully grasp. It's like walking through a mist that has always been there, influencing our thoughts, guiding our choices, and helping us navigate the complexities of existence. History itself becomes a manifestation of this unconscious connection, as though the events that unfold are expressions of these deeper, shared instincts. The rise and fall of civilizations, the patterns of conflict and cooperation, all may be reflections of something timeless, something rooted in the psyche of humanity. We may think we are unique in our time, but the collective unconscious suggests otherwise. It reveals that, across centuries, we are bound by similar fears, desires, and instincts. In this way, history is more than just a record. It is a living, breathing organism, shaped by forces we only partly understand. Each generation adds to this collective memory, and in turn, draws from it, perpetuating the cycle. The past is not something distant or separate. It's woven into the fabric of our minds, passed down through the ages, invisibly steering the course of human events. Wandering through modern landscapes, you can still feel the faint echoes of wars long past. It's not always obvious. Sometimes it's the remnants of an old bunker, or the subtle unevenness of a field that was once a battlefield. But even when the physical scars have healed, the weight of history remains. The land holds memory in ways that go beyond monuments and plaques. It's as though the ground itself has absorbed the suffering, the fear, the resilience of those who once fought and died there. In cities, the echoes are often hidden in plain sight. Streets bustling with life might have been the scene of destruction decades ago, yet people walk them unaware of the battles once fought where they now shop or gather. Old buildings, some patched up and modernized, bear the invisible weight of the past. Beneath the surface, the landscape remembers. The trauma of war lingers in ways that affect the psyche of those who live there, even if they don't consciously connect with that history. Nature, too, has a way of reclaiming what war has scarred, yet in doing so, it doesn't erase what happened. Fields that were once muddy trenches are now covered in grass, forests have regrown over bomb craters, but there's a strange silence in these places, as though time itself hesitates to move on fully. Walking through them, you feel a quiet presence, an unsettling sense that the land has witnessed things too terrible to easily forget. People in these landscapes carry an unconscious awareness of this history, passed down through generations. It shapes how they think about conflict, about peace, and even about the future. It's in the stories grandparents tell, or in the hesitation to speak about certain events, memories that still live just beneath the surface, waiting to be acknowledged. The echoes of wars are not just in the physical remnants, but in the way communities remember, even when they try to forget. Every conflict leaves behind not just a landscape altered by battle, but people altered by the weight of living with those memories. Even as life moves on, the land and the people hold onto fragments of the past, woven into the present. There's a tension between the desire to rebuild, to cover over the scars, and the knowledge that those scars, visible or not, will never entirely disappear. Long before the written word, history was passed down through stories spoken aloud, shared from one generation to the next. It wasn't just the facts that were preserved, but the emotions, the voices, and the soul of a people's past. When someone sat by the fire and listened to a story, they weren't just hearing about events, they were feeling them, absorbing the rhythm and the meaning behind the words. Oral tradition became a living vessel for history, not static like books, but evolving, adapting to new listeners while keeping the heart of the story alive. These stories weren't just about dates or battles. They were about the people who lived through those times, their struggles, their triumphs, and their wisdom. In many ways, oral tradition made history personal. When a tale was told, it was often about family, ancestors, or community. The storyteller would weave in gestures, pauses, and inflections that brought the past to life. There was something profoundly human in the way history was shared. It was more than information. It was connection. The act of telling was itself an act of remembrance, a way to keep the past close. In cultures where writing was rare or inaccessible, oral tradition was the only means of preserving the essence of who they were. Through songs, chants, and spoken narratives, people were able to hold on to their identity, even through war, migration, or or oppression. It gave them resilience, a way to carry their roots with them wherever they went. The stories might shift slightly over time, but the core truths, those moments of shared human experience, remained intact, passed on with a sense of duty to those who came before. Oral tradition also allowed history to remain fluid, relevant. It wasn't frozen in time like a dusty archive. It was alive, able to reflect the present while honoring the past. Each telling was a new interpretation, shaped by the storyteller's own experiences and perspective. And yet, this constant retelling created a thread that connected generations. The past wasn't something distant or unreachable. It was always present, always part of the now. When we think about history today, we often focus on the written records, the artifacts, the documented facts. But there's a heartbeat in the stories spoken aloud, something that can't be captured on a page. Oral tradition keeps history grounded in the human experience, reminding us that the past is not just about what happened, but how it felt to those who lived through it. It's in the voices of elders, in the words passed down through centuries, a living reminder that history is not just something to be learned, it's something to be felt. Imagine carrying the experiences of your ancestors within you, not through stories or photos, but embedded in your very biology. Genetic memory and epigenetics suggest that, in some way, the life your forebears lived might shape who you are today, beyond what you've directly experienced. It's a strange thought that trauma, survival instincts, and even certain learned behaviors can be passed down through generations, altering how your genes express themselves. This isn't about inheriting a memory like a vivid scene, but rather a deep, unconscious influence on your body and mind. Epigenetics shows how life's challenges, whether it's famine, stress, or fear, can leave a mark on the genetic code, like a set of instructions layered on top of your DNA. It's as if your genes are a script, and epigenetic changes are the edits that change how that script plays out. These changes don't alter the basic code itself, but they influence how genes are turned on or off, depending on what your ancestors endured. It's like their struggles and adaptations live on within you, guiding your body's responses without you even knowing it. This passing down of experiences has a subtle but profound impact. Maybe it's why certain fears seem to arise out of nowhere, or why certain instincts feel more pronounced. The hardships faced generations ago might leave traces in how your body handles stress or how it responds to certain environmental triggers. It's like an invisible inheritance, one that's not so much a memory you can recall, but an imprint you carry with you, shaping who you are at the deepest levels. There's something deeply human in this idea. It reminds us that we're not entirely separate from those who came before us. Their lives continue in ways we can't fully see but can sometimes feel. It's a quiet connection, one that's passed down not through stories or teachings, but through the silent language of genes. The choices they made, the battles they fought, the environments they adapted to, they all play a role in the person you are today. The field of epigenetics shows us that the past is never really gone. It lingers in our cells, whispering through the generations, shaping not just who we are, but who we might become. Every experience leaves a mark, not just on the individual, but on the lineage that follows, as if life itself has a memory, storing away the lessons learned for future generations. There's something endlessly captivating about cryptic historical artifacts, objects that seem to resist explanation, holding their secrets tight across the ages. These artifacts feel like whispers from a time long gone, fragments of history that were once understood but now leave us puzzled. They stir a strange mix of curiosity and frustration, as if they're teasing us with half-revealed truths, daring us to uncover their purpose. The weight of not knowing makes these relics even more compelling, drawing us deeper into the mystery of the people who left them behind. When you stand before one of these cryptic objects, a carved stone with no clear meaning, an intricate device with no known function, you can almost sense the hands that shaped it, the minds that conceived it. There's an undeniable human connection in that moment. Even though the context has been lost, you can feel the intelligence, the intention, but the language to interpret it has faded over time. It's as though these artifacts exist in a space between understanding and oblivion, suspended in a kind of historical limbo. These objects challenge our assumptions about ancient civilizations. They remind us that the past is not always what we think it is, that entire systems of knowledge may have existed and then vanished, leaving only cryptic traces behind. What seems mysterious to us now may have been obvious to those who created them, a normal part of life. But as time eroded their meanings, we're left with only questions. What did they believe? What were they trying to communicate? How did they understand the world? The thrill of these artifacts lies in their ambiguity. Each theory, each attempt to decode them, adds another layer to their mystique. Are they religious symbols? Tools? Messages for future generations? There's a sense of humility that comes with facing these puzzles, a recognition that despite all our advancements, there are still things we may never fully grasp. And in that uncertainty, there's a quiet reverence for the human mind, both ours in trying to solve the mystery and theirs in having created it. Even when we don't have the answers, cryptic artifacts connect us to the idea of continuity. People lived, thought, and created before us, and their legacy, though fragmented and often incomprehensible, lingers on. These objects are like unsolved riddles left in the margins of history, and even if we never unlock their meaning, they remind us of the vast complexity and creativity that humanity has always carried. The enigma is part of their power, reminding us that history holds more than facts. It holds mysteries that may never be fully understood, but will always fascinate. Folklore often feels like a fantastical escape, full of magic, spirits, and larger-than-life heroes. But there's something deeply human in knowing that many of these stories are rooted in real events. The origins of these tales often began as ordinary experiences, perhaps a natural disaster, a strange encounter, or a great leader's deeds that slowly transformed into legend as they were passed from one person to the next. It's as if the raw facts of history weren't enough on their own. They needed to be layered with meaning, imagination, and symbolism to speak to something deeper within people. Over time, these real events blur with embellishments, but the core truth often remains, hidden beneath layers of myth. Take, for example, stories of great floods found in cultures across the globe. While the details differ, the flood might be caused by an angry god or a cosmic imbalance. The root often points back to real ancient floods that left a mark on human memory. The transformation of a devastating flood into a divine punishment or a test of human resilience gave people a way to make sense of the overwhelming forces of nature. It wasn't just a disaster. It became a story with purpose, a lesson passed down through generations. In many ways, folklore helps people process the unexplainable. When something extraordinary happens, whether it's a war, a strange natural phenomenon, or the rise of a legendary figure, facts alone don't always satisfy. Folklore allows communities to take these events and weave them into the fabric of their identity, creating stories that speak to their values, fears, and dreams. The truth might be there, hidden in the folds of myth, but it's wrapped in layers of cultural meaning, evolving with each telling. As these tales grow over time, they become more than just echoes of real events. They take on lives of their own. Characters who might have once been ordinary people are elevated to heroic status, while mundane events become epic battles between good and evil. It's easy to see how reality might slip into legend, especially when these stories are told to inspire, to warn, or to explain the unknown. The beauty of folklore lies in its ability to connect the everyday to the extraordinary, turning real experiences into stories that resonate far beyond their original moment. Yet, even as these stories stretch the boundaries of reality, they remain tethered to the human experience. At their heart, they reveal how people coped with loss, fear, hope, and survival. They show how history, when seen through the lens of folklore, becomes not just a record of what happened, but a reflection of how people felt about what happened. And in that blending of fact and fiction, a new kind of truth emerges, one that captures the spirit of the event, even if the details have been transformed. As we come to the end of this journey through the echoes of the past, it's clear that history is never truly behind us. These unseen connections between past and present, forgotten memories, and ancient mysteries all remind us that we're part of a much larger story. Every relic, every myth, every imprint left behind carries a piece of the human experience, quietly shaping the world we live in today. Thank you for exploring these echoes with me, and for diving into the strange, often hidden ties that link us to those who came before. If this journey through time stirred your curiosity, be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to Quiet Universe for more dives into the mysteries that shape our world. There's always more to uncover, and I can't wait to explore it with you. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and remember, the past is never as far away as it seems.